Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Man Cave Morons, the post NBA trade deadline edition. Lots to get into with the NBA trade deadline, but first I want to start with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo signs a 5-year, $137 million contract to be the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. $74 million of that guaranteed. Not bad for someone who started 7 games in the NFL. Um, just quickly on that, it's a big roll of dice for the 49ers. He had a great year last year, went 5-0 with them. Has shown, that he has some poise out there, can do well, but definitely changes the landscape of the quarterback situation in this league. You look at Alex Smith signing a big deal with Washington. Now you got Kirk Cousins out there, Drew Brees, other individuals who are going to be free agents and looking for big paydays. So it was kind of surprising. I really thought the 49ers make sense for them to lock him up. But I thought maybe a franchise tag for a year, let him play a full season, see what you can learn a little bit more about him, see him in some adversity. But I guess, with practice and everything else, they saw enough. So they're locking up what they hope to be their quarterback of the future and the present. So it was a big shocker. It was a big shocker to see him receive such a large deal, so much money guaranteed. I read stories today that if you dig into the minutia of the deal, it is team friendly. They do have some outs after 3 years, I believe. So, I'm sure that they're savvy enough to protect themselves, but it did seem like a little bit of a shock that after 5 starts for them, they would run out and give him a 5-year deal. So we'll see how things play out. This is a team that didn't have a lot of weapons around him, and they still went 5-0. This is a team that needs tight end help. They need wide receiver help. They probably could use running back help. I mean, Carlos Hyde's okay. But, if they put some weapons around him and he continues to progress the way he has and play the way he did last year, this contract's probably going to look like a bargain. But it does set the tone for some big free agency stuff. And there's a lot of quarterbacks out there. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. And, like I talked about earlier this week with Nick Foles, if a team feels like they found their guy, they're going to pay and they're going to give up stuff. So the 49ers gave up a second-round pick. They felt they had the guy that they wanted for the future, and they decided to go out and pay him. So props to Jimmy Garoppolo for getting paid after such a short amount of time, and hopefully he produces for the 49ers and they don't look back on this deal and regret it, as everything in sports, only time will tell. So I wanted to touch on that before we dig into the meat of the show today, which is going to be the trade deadline. And basically it's going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers, because a lot of the other trades that went on out there were kind of meaningless. There was some small level players that got moved. A lot of teams didn't make a move. Celtics didn't make a move. Thunder didn't make a move. Teams that you thought would, teams that there was a lot of rumors out there. There's rumors about the Celtics trading Marcus Smart. There was rumors with Tyreek Evans and a couple teams. Rumors about Avery Bradley and OKC. None of those things materialized. So basically, we're looking at the Cavs, and Cavs were the clear winners. They were the clear winners on draft day. They got younger. They got more athletic. They got a much better defense, and they got rid of, in my mind, what are some cancers that were on the team. I was never a big fan of Isaiah Thomas when he was in Boston. I think Isaiah Thomas was behind a lot of the Kevin Love stuff that was going on in the locker room. He never seemed to mesh really with this squad. I think Isaiah Thomas thinks a lot more of himself than a lot of other people do. So I think it was good to move him on. And recapping, they traded IT, Channing Frye, and their first-round pick for Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. Immediately, now you're bringing in 2 guys who are 25. Jordan Clarkson's the leading scorer off the bench in the NBA. He's averaging 14 points a game. Larry Nance is averaging 8 points a game and 6 boards. They got length. They got youth. They got athleticism. They're going to play some defense. I don't know what the lineup's going to be like. The lineup changes. I mean, they shipped 6 guys out, brought 4 back. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out in those first couple of games. But immediately, it's an upgrade. Clarkson's high energy, Nance is high energy. They're getting out of a bad situation in LA, and coming to a Cavs team that's third in the East and potentially every year is fighting for the number one seed and fighting to go to the NBA Finals out of the East. So mentally, these two guys are probably feeling they're in a much better situation. For the Cavs, you're moving out IT, who, like I said, I think was a cancer on the team. A guy who I don't think was ever going to mesh in, let's be honest, a guy they weren't going to re-sign in the offseason anyway. So you might as well get two players that you control for the next year plus, and players that are younger. And so it just made sense to move Isaiah Thomas. Another trade, they got rid of Dwayne Wade. I think this Dwayne Wade experiment was a failure. He's clearly past his prime. He wasn't giving them what they thought he was going to give them or what LeBron thought he still had left in the tank. Wade gets to go back to Miami. He gets to retire where he belongs. It'll be a nice homecoming for him. And Miami's still a team that could make the playoffs. And I don't know if they're going to make any noise in the playoffs, but I think it's a fitting return for Dwayne Wade and a fitting end for his career. And with that second rounder that they got for Dwayne Wade, they end up turning around and making a 3-team deal to bring in Rodney Hood and George Hill. And then they ship out Jay Crowder, Mon Shumpert, that second round pick that they got, and Derrick Rose. So again, they moved a lot of the guys they got in the offseason. Again, you look at D Rose, you look at Wade, you look at Crowder, you look at Thomas. These are guys they picked up in the offseason. They did not mesh. It was not working. Move those guys right out of town. Rodney Hood, bring him back in. Again, a 25-year-old kid, 16 points a game average. He's a long shooting guard, 6'8", got length, got athleticism. And George Hill, 31. He's a little younger than some of your other options that you have. But again, he's a guy that can play defense. So again, these guys are all leaving situations that weren't really working for him. I mean, poor George Hill is in Sacramento. Long term, he wasn't going anywhere there. So they have the ability to bring him, get him out of there, bring him in the fold. And, obviously when teams are playing for contenders, they tend to play a little differently. So maybe a change of scenery is great for these four guys coming in. It will probably take a little while to see how they mesh with LeBron and everybody else. But I think the Cavs did a good job of keeping players that they should keep. Obviously they're going to keep LeBron. Kevin Love makes sense. J.R. Smith's a good guy to keep. He's a guy who knows the system. He's a guy who can get hot. Kyle Korver is another one of those guys. Tristan Thompson's another one of those guys. Keeping players that have been through the last 3 years, have a veteran presence, have some stability, and are guys that when they get hot, can be forces. Jeff Green's another one of those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, I mean, half the roster pretty much is turned over. It'll be interesting to see what the starting five is. Does Rodney Hood start? Do you go with a lineup of Tristan, Larry Nance, LeBron, JR, and George Hill, and keep Clarkson coming off the bench? Do you put Rodney Hill in there somewhere? And go with kind of a smaller lineup. LeBron kind of goes to the 4. Rodney would go maybe to the 3 with JR because Rodney Hill is kind of long. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next couple of weeks. But I personally think it's a great move for the Cavs. It solidifies their spot in the East. And, I don't see them dropping below 3. But now I see them possibly making a push to 2 or 1. And I think you're going to see a re-energized LeBron. That game the other night, the double overtime game, where he hits the game winner, that could be looked back as a turning point in this season. The tides change, clean house in the locker room. Let's get some momentum going into the All-Star break. Let's start to gel, and let's see how these things go. With teams like the Celtics and the Raptors not really making any moves, the Celtics did finalize the Greg Monroe deal, which I think is really going to help them long term. They needed some help in the middle. So it'll be interesting to see if the Cavs can overtake those two teams that are in front of them. as it takes time for them to gel. You know, one of the big things that didn't happen was DeAndre Jordan. I think a lot of people thought DeAndre Jordan was going to be moved. That didn't happen. Lou Williams signs the extension with the Clippers, which makes you wonder what's going on with the Clippers. When he signs the extension, you think, are they going to move him, or now are they hanging on to him? I think it makes sense for the Clippers to hang on to him. I think Lou Williams is a guy who can, fill the basket, and he's a good ball player. Will DeAndre Jordan stay around? Will he opt in? What's going to happen with him? I don't know. But the Clippers seem to have a couple pieces they could build around. They didn't move Avery Bradley. That was a guy that was rumored a lot to be going somewhere. But they got a pretty decent backcourt right now. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. And both they and the Pistons have seemed to play better now that trades happen. And that does tend to happen when you get a guy who's been in that position for a while, like a Blake Griffin. Change of scenery, change of attitude, a lot of stuff happens. So, DeAndre Jordan staying put, and like I said, Avery Bradley staying put, Tyreke Evans. Now there's rumors out there that Tyreke Evans might just sign a longer deal with Memphis. So we'll be interested to see that. The Knicks making a weird deal for Moutier, which was kind of puzzling. Now they're kind of really guard heavy. They did send Dougie Buckets out, which was just kind of a weird deal as well. That 3-team trade just didn't seem to make sense for a lot of anyone in that deal. Why the Mavs need Doug McDermott's beyond me. But now you got Moutier, you got Frank, you got Garrett Jack still. The Knicks seem very guard heavy. You would have thought, they did get rid of Hernan Gomez, which was kind of weird. You'd think they would keep a younger player like Gomez. But with Porzingis down now, I just kind of expected the Knicks to do a little bit more in the way of cleaning house, almost like the Lakers. The Lakers did a great job in cleaning house. They're not gonna sign Isaiah Thomas. I mean, the Lakers' whole push here was to clean house, free up cap space, and that's what they've done. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in LA with Isaiah Thomas and Lonzo Ball, though. Isaiah doesn't want to come off the bench. Is Lonzo going to come off the bench? Are they both going to be on the court at the same time? I mean, are you going to put IT at the 2 guard at 5'8"? Who knows? So this will be an interesting experiment over the last couple of months of the season, watching these two operate. But Isaiah Thomas is playing for a contract, and he's played himself out of, I think, a contract. I mean, at the end of last year, a lot of people probably would have given him big money. But it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out for Isaiah Thomas, because I think he's leaving millions of dollars on the table with what happened in Cleveland, and now to see what happens in LA. It's not the best scenario for him to be in with a guy like Lonzo Ball there. Now, the other thing that a lot of people are talking about is LeBron going to Cleveland. LeBron going to the Lakers now. Lakers freed up all this cap space. They're going to bring in Paul George. They're going to bring in LeBron. I haven't been sold on LeBron going to LA since these rumors started over a year ago. LeBron is chasing rings. LeBron wants to get to finals. Easiest way to get to any finals is to stay in the East. And I just don't see LeBron going out west and having to fight the likes of Houston and Golden State, OKC, teams like this to get to the finals. So I think the LeBron to the West Coast rumors are greatly overrated. And even if you bring in Paul George, LeBron and Paul George doesn't necessarily strike fear in me. I just don't see those two guys with whatever else the Lakers have. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram. I don't know. I just don't see that being as a super team to overtake the Warriors. So I think LeBron stays in the East. Maybe Cleveland did enough to convince him to stay in Cleveland. They got younger. They didn't get rid of the Nets pick. They didn't get rid of Kevin Love. They have a good base to build around still. You got the best player in the league in LeBron. Maybe that Nets pick becomes a high pick, and you can go out there and get some good talent and convince LeBron to stay. So, it was an eventful trade deadline because the Cavs were so busy. I mean, it just seemed like every second you refreshed Twitter and there was another trade. But it was uneventful from the standpoint that not a lot of other teams got involved. The Spurs didn't make any moves. Not that they were rumored to, but they're a team that's close. Thunder again, like I mentioned, they're another team that's close. Toronto, none of these teams really went out of their way. I think they put out some feelers to see what was going on, but at the end of the day, the Celtics didn't want to give up any draft picks. They didn't find anything that was enough to convince them to separate themselves from Marcus Smart. So they held pat. So it'll be interesting to see down the stretch. We are coming into All-Star break here. Teams are going to get rested up, and then we're going to go for the stretch run. And in my mind, we'll do some stuff probably next week in regards to mid-season picks. What are we looking at for the second half? But it looks to clearly be a 3-team race in the East and possibly a 4-team race in the West. I'll throw OKC in there. OKC's 3-0 against the Warriors this year. So it could be a 4-team race in the West, and it's not. I don't think it's a solid Warriors Cleveland matchup again, like a lot of people thought. But we'll get more into the second half of the NBA and some predictions probably in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, that's really what I wanted to touch on today was just the trade deadline stuff, the excitement. If you're a Cavs fan or just a fan of the NBA with all the moving around, we'll just keep an eye on how that progresses over the next couple of weeks with the Cavs and meshing those teams together. UNC, real quickly, UNC, big win over Duke last night. It was a very good game, very competitive. And as we're moving into March Madness, as we get into conference tournament time, we'll definitely be talking more about the college basketball landscape. That's probably something we'll touch on next week. But coming up this weekend, Cavs and Celtics on Sunday. I believe that's a 3:30 game on Sunday on ABC. We do not have to worry about an IT video anymore now on Paul Pierce retirement night. So that's a moot point. We can move away from that. But that'll be a fun game to watch. Fun to see how the Cavs are starting to transition. So basketball over the weekend. Pebble Beach is going on, so golf is in full effect, and that's getting into the swing of things. And for those that care, the Winter Olympics are out there. Probably not going to touch much on the Winter Olympics and what's going on there, but we'll be back next week to discuss more basketball, as that's the big thing, and any free agent signings that might happen in baseball as spring training starts to begin. So enjoy your weekend, folks. Thanks for tuning in again. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, follow the website, push out this YouTube video, friends, family, anyone you know. We want to get more and more views, more and more people following. Feel free to send in, any emails, ManCaveMorons@gmail.com. Any questions that you might have, things you want to discuss, feel free to reach out and get involved. So again, enjoy your evening, enjoy your weekend, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.